weather. It's absolutely beautiful, like so beautiful here. Really excited and having so much fun. And Nikki just hit 12K. She just earned her car bonus. How exciting is it, Nikki?
So exciting that I can't talk.
Cadillac, Lexus, BMW, Mercedes, and an Audi. So she has a lot of choices. We've been test driving already. We went to the Lexus dealership. We got the Tesla dealership we got to go to. And so maybe the Audi dealership. So, all right, everybody. Bye.
Inmates will try to forget about the outside world when they know they will never see the light of day. I know people that have been down since the 90s, and sometimes wonder how they're doing. I run into relatives of incarcerated individuals that I once called a friend or a brother 25 years ago, who are still down. Then life overwhelms us as it goes on, and we forget that they exist after a while. It's a sad but true reality. Inmates have their good and bad days, as good as it can get under the circumstances. Nobody can ever really be happy in prison, right? I've actually met inmates who were very content with being incarcerated, institutionalized, and down for 20 with 20 to go. I suppose one can find peace on the inside. Everyone is different with different upbringings. If life in the free world was filled with pain and hurt already, then prison might not be so bad in comparison. Chris had a beautiful family, a good job, and a nice home. I was in the Dodge Correctional Institution, still on a PO hold. Wisconsin parole and probation were holding me in a prison, though I was not yet sentenced to prison. They had me right where they wanted me. It was a terrible feeling to be in that situation. I was currently working on a book series with Chris. It was our God's Plan series. We had created a series of spiritual books. Chris and I had an outlet where we could vent through scripture, saying things that are not revealed, and interpreting the Word of God. Chris and I were making progress working on our cases. In my case, possession with intent. The police never field tested what they identified as equity. In his case, things were very complicated. He had confessed 3 different times, in 3 different ways. However, the trauma from the tragedy brought him fear just to talk about it. We were slowly progressing in everything we did. 1, spiritually. 2, our workouts. 3, our cases. 4, knowledge. 5, wisdom. 6, understanding. Utilizing our time by staying productive while imprisoned was actually a good use of time. Chris and I just had a conversation about his case, and things were dicey. Over 50% of inmates are convicted, and the courts do not have 75% of the facts of their cases. Nowadays, 90% of criminal convictions are resolved by plea deals. Chris took a plea deal, and only a few months after his arrest. Usually these types of cases take years to resolve, especially when an entire family has been taken. Proverbs 25:2. It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the glory of kings is to search out a matter. We delved deeper into his case and made progress. Chris was beginning to open up to me about everything. On this particular day, we were discussing his case. I was looking for grounds for an appeal. So you're saying you took a plea deal before having a preliminary hearing? I asked. Yes, Chris replied. Are you sure you didn't waive your rights to a preliminary hearing? I asked. What do you mean? Chris asked. Did you sign something saying you don't want a preliminary hearing? I asked. I don't think so, he managed. Why did you sign a plea deal to the maximum punishment? I questioned. Colorado had the death penalty, and they told me if I didn't take the plea, they would give me the death sentence, he told me. That's basically a threat. Sign here or die, I replied. It felt like it, he said. I don't think you can do that, bro, I told Chris. I leafed through the Black's Law Dictionary and found change of venue. Bro, this says if your case has a lot of publicity, you can hear your case somewhere else. In your case, perhaps another country, I laughed. Or another planet, he laughed and returned. At least he could find humor in his nearly hopeless situation. My attorney told me to file ineffective assistance of counsel on him, he said. So basically he told you that he didn't assist you in your best possible defense as required by law? Also, it took these types of cases a couple of years to resolve. Yours only took a few months. That's not normal or even heard of, I told him. If I go back to court on appeal, they will transfer me back to Colorado, and inmates and people there want to kill me, which is why they sent me here, he explained. I am just not looking forward to reliving all this. It was the worst thing I have ever experienced, he said. I know, but do it for your parents. They love you and it would mean the world to your mom, I said. Yeah, it would. But these phone calls are recorded and I said too much over these phone calls, he admitted. You also had 3 different ways you said you did it, I exclaimed. Because I confessed, how will I come back from that? Chris asked. They threatened your life and got you. No, wait, bullied you into a guilty plea. You were an easy target. The husband, they needed this case under wraps for some reason, I conveyed. There was an election coming up, I think, he said. Now we can go over these circuit court trial errors all day, but it will come down to you fighting your cases again if you get your sentence overturned. You will be back on trial, I said. Then the truth will have to come out. I don't want to cause my wife's family any more grief, Chris said. What about your family and their constant grief? I pointed out. All you can do from here is redeem yourself because you confessed to your wife and kids in cold blood, I said. I didn't them in cold blood, Chris replied, slightly defensively. My wife came home and she knew I was having an affair. We got into a fight. She attacked me. I was simply defending myself. And then my daughter, she... Standing count, the sergeant announced, interrupting our conversation. After she did her round, we continued our conversation. Afterward, I talked to Jezebel. I panicked, so I confided in her, and she said she would help me, he said. My wife medicated her heavily that night because she kept crying. After I killed my wife by choking her to death because she had a knife, something in me just died. It was an accident. I loved her with all my heart, and still do. I just want to honor her memory and not ruin her memory. People want the truth, but I don't owe it to anyone. It's my family that I lost, and it's me serving life in prison. What else do I owe? Chris asked. You owe yourself a fair chance. Redemption at that. The truth shall set you free, bro. The ball's in your court. Only you can appeal your case. Only you can put truth out there, and only God can judge you, I explained. When they tell me to put my hand on the Bible and swear, I'm going to open it to where Jesus forbids oath. Chris laughed. Well, I'm not sure how that'll fly, but I'd love to see the reaction in the courtroom, I said. Anyway, I told my mistress what had happened, and she told me how to hide my wife's body. She said to bring the girls with. I was just on autopilot, like in shock. So I grabbed my younger daughter out of bed. She was asleep. My older daughter was awake and asking about her mom. I told her that she was in a deep sleep and Daddy was going to get her some help and wake up. Before we left, I had to check in with Mr. Tallman, you have a pass to CPSU. the sergeant announced. I was going to see my clinical psychologist. We'll finish this conversation when I get back, all right? I suggested. Yeah, sure, Chris replied. I have heard a lot about people's cases directly from them. This case was different from the rest. I have a discerning spirit and I was able to tell that he wouldn't fly in cold blood. However, what I know so far is that he killed his wife, but not intentionally. Next, I was going to find out exactly what happened to the girls. Until next time, Dylan Tallman. Chris is very lucky he didn't commit these heinous crimes in states like Florida or Texas. Yeah, he's in prison for the rest of his days. At least he isn't stressing about his date like inmates on death row for less than what inmate Watts has done. Death row inmates are housed in a whole different building and are locked in most of the day, counting the days. The government won't take you out right away. They want you to adapt to prison life and get used to your daily routines. There does come a point when inmates get comfortable and begin to find a little purpose in prison life, finding things to look forward to. That is when the governor will issue that death warrant and hand down your death date. Right when you think this ain't so bad and done got used to things, so you can anticipate and worry about your final moments on earth. Death row prisoners are typically incarcerated in solitary confinement, subject to more deprivation and harsher conditions than other prisoners. As a result, many experience declining mental health. Counting down the days, Ted Bundy was on death row and was terrified and thought he could manipulate a stay by offering to tell the FBI about more victims, even willing to tell them where they were located in hopes to get more time on Earth. Bundy was too much of a puss, though. His last victim was 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, kidnapping her by her school in Lake City, Florida, on February 9th, 1978. Kimberly was going to meet a friend and head to class together. 2 months later, her body was found 35 miles away in Suwannee River State Park. Go figure. The man that had no remorse for well over 30 victims was afraid to die. Walking down the extremely long corridor of Dodge Correctional Institution, I thought about what the brother had just told me. How could he just sit on such information? How could he be so complacent in his situation? He was sentenced to life in prison. He was never going home. I couldn't relate, but if it was me, I would be trying to get some type of fighting chance. The thought of spending life behind bars was just crazy because I had spent my whole life behind bars thus far. My entire time that I was incarcerated, all I did was look forward to going home. My end goal was to be released, and that's what motivated me. If I had no release date, then I would have nothing to look forward to, and nothing to motivate me. It was both unsettling and admirable to think of what was motivating Chris. My clinical psychologist was beautiful, so it was hard to open up to her. Also, there has only been one or maybe two clinicians who have actually helped me, and it wasn't this one. But more recent, my court had been delayed once again because of COVID-19. I was stuck in this non-prisoner status longer, where I didn't have any of the privileges that other inmates had, but I had all the same bullshit rules to follow. Figures. I would be stuck in Dodge, so I was going to continue to make the best of it and finish the book project Chris and I had started. Perhaps we could both get back in court on appeal as well. It would be a lot of work. It would be a task more difficult than others, but not exactly impossible. The chapel was packed on this particular night, and we had 2 guest speakers. Our choir was really good. The choir was made up of Dodge inmates. This guy Fletcher was blind, bald-headed, and black. He was the lead singer, and his voice was shockingly great. Chris and I sat in the back corner row. Jesus scorned the Pharisees and the scribe for always sitting in the best seats, for wearing the best robes, etc. We chose the humble road. Our minister, Chaplain Waketon, was once an inmate in a Texas prison for 7 years. I could relate to his past. His transformation was very admirable. The first speaker was a tall, skinny black guy. He was at the door greeting people as they were coming in. It was getting packed. That was when I spotted someone I knew from the streets. He was an enemy. We were on SOS, smash on sight terms. He looked over at me and began walking in my direction. I stood up and began walking toward him to show him that I was BTA, about that action too. We stood there face to face. "You want to do this right here?" I challenged him. "This is the only place I'm going to give you a pass in. You're lucky we're in the house of God." I felt a hand on my shoulder pulling me back. It was Chris. "Come on, go sit down," Chris said, as he stepped between us and directed my enemy in the opposite direction. We sat down and listened to the choir singing. I wrote it in red. Chris handed me a Bible and had it open to Ecclesiastes and pointed to chapter 7, verse 9. "Do not hasten your spirit to be angry, for anger rests in the bosom of fools." I nodded my head to assure him that I received and understood the message. "Who was that?" Chris asked me. "An old friend," I told him. The choir finished. Then the guest speaker gave a powerful sermon, and it hit me a little differently than usual. Some preachers' sermons are too dry for my taste, where I cannot relate. This guy, however, seemed to speak to me. The service was over and the COs were calling us unit by unit. My enemy was lucky that he was on one of the far units because he had our word and robbed one of my homegirls. In the stark, oppressive environment of prison, where every day is a challenge, loyalty takes a profound significance. Inmates stripped of their freedom and thrust into a world where trust is rare and danger is omnipresent, often forms bonds of loyalty that can be complex as they are intense. These relationships, forged in the crucible of incarceration, can define an inmate's experience behind bars, influencing their actions, their chances of survival, and even their future outside prison walls. Loyalty in prison is not just about camaraderie or friendship. It is often a matter of life and death. Within the rigid social structure of prison, loyalty can mean protection, a sense of belonging, and a shield against the ever-present threat of violence. But it can also lead to entanglement in dangerous activities, force individuals into compromising situations, and place them at odds with the very system that holds them. The prison environment, with its unwritten rules and power dynamics, creates a unique setting where loyalty is both demanded and tested, which is one of the reasons why I'm surprised inmate Watts allowed Dylan to get close to him. Chris's experience taught him that loyalty can serve as currency for survival, but it can also mean that trusting the wrong one can lead to definite unaliving. However, loyalty in this context is not always straightforward. It can be driven by genuine emotional bonds, but just as often it is motivated by self-interest, fear, or coercion. The lines between loyalty, manipulation, and self-preservation are frequently blurred, creating a moral and ethical quagmire for those who must navigate this treacherous terrain. In prison, there's a psychological and emotional need that drives individuals to form these bonds. The need for belonging, the fear of isolation, and the constant threat of violence all contribute to the formation of loyalties that may not align with an inmate's personal values or long-term goals. The emotional weight of loyalty can be overwhelming, with inmates often forced to choose between their survival and their integrity. After Chris and I returned from service, we were talking about end-of-time prophecies. We often spoke of life after death and what it would be like being free from bondage. Chris knew that he was never going home. However, his spirit was free. He refused to allow his surroundings to define him. I, on the other hand, struggled somewhat with being caged in. I felt my incarceration. I hated it, and I still do now. "How are you so humble with having life in prison?" I asked. He sighed and said, "Because God has me right where He wants me. Perhaps I can help the people in here. If you win on your appeal, you can help many people. A lot of these guys in here have all the help they need. Your mom and dad are doing this time with you. I have put the gray in my mother's hair. If you don't do it for you, then do it for your family," I told him. "Oh, I'm going to fight. My family's still looking for an attorney. They cost so much. One wanted 100,000 and others wanted even more, he said. Perhaps our books will gross enough money, then we could lock in with a good lawyer, I said. That money is all you. I just want people to believe in Jesus Christ, he said. I'll just put your cut toward whatever you tell me to. However, we don't have this thing fully finished yet, I sighed. I was an author of one book so far, and I promised Chris I would get us published. We were continuing to work on a book series called God's Plan. I think we will be done once you are released, he suggested through the electrical outlet. So we work on it until then, I asked, or until they move one of us. I will stay here until they move you, or until you go home, he said. You know, I really don't like writing, I admitted to him. Why do you write then, he asked me. Because I have to. I have been locked up my whole life. I didn't go to college. I didn't have a career, a 401, a house, or kids. I've never even had the chance to file taxes. I looked down at the concrete floor and shook my head. This is all I have, so I can't fail at writing. It's this or the old life. I either sell books or I sell drugs, I admitted.
Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. Ooh, ooh. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. Ooh, ooh. Huh? Can I see a picture? Say cheese. Aw, say here we go.
Careful of the corner of the wall. She's biting your shirt.
Don't pull me down, CC.
Chris lives in a box now and reads his Bible. Inmate Watts, in my opinion, will forever live in regret. He will adapt to prison life like everyone else, but he will always live in fear. Inmates will never accept what he did to his family, and it's just a matter of time.